Lennon is a true Renaissance man. He's a recording artist, a filmmaker. Please welcome back the fabulous and my friend, Julian Lennon.
You see, it's strange because at one period when they're asking me, I was saying, no, never. What the hell? Go back? No, not me. And then there came a period when I thought, well, why not? If we felt like making a record or doing something. Everybody always envisions the stage show. To me, if we work together at the studio again, you know, Julian Lennon is undeniably a name that holds history, heartbreak, and a touch of rebellion. Born to the legendary John Lennon and his first wife Cynthia, Julian grew up in the shadow of his father's fame. His father's love story unfolded elsewhere. While Julian found his own path in music and art, he was left with deep-seated feelings of hurt and distance. But who does Julian truly despise? Join us as we dive into the complex emotions and tangled family dynamics that still affect Julian to this day. But before we explore Julian's journey, let's step back to the beginning, to the story of how he came into the world and how his parents' relationship set the stage for everything that followed. A complicated start and growing distance. John Lennon and Cynthia Powell met in 1957 as students at the Liverpool College of Art. Though Cynthia was already engaged, John's bold and unapologetic nature quickly made its mark. When she initially turned down his advances, he famously snapped, "I didn't ask you to marry me, did I?" They began dating, and despite his growing fame with the Beatles, John and Cynthia married in 1962 after Cynthia became pregnant with their son Julian. But their marriage wasn't the fairy tale some might expect. John faced challenges in managing his emotions, which sometimes affected his relationship with Cynthia. Reflecting on those times, John later admitted to being violent, saying in a candid 1980 interview with Playboy, "I used to be cruel to my woman, and physically, any woman, I was a hitter." This awareness didn't come until he was older and had met Yoko Ono. A relationship, he said, challenged him to question his views about women. Still, during his early days with Cynthia, John's jealousy often turned to aggression, creating tension and fear in their marriage. At the peak of Beatlemania, John and Cynthia were advised to keep their marriage a secret. The Beatles' managers feared it might damage his image and alienate fans, so while John's fame skyrocketed, Cynthia was often left in the shadows. As the Beatles evolved, so did John's personal life. Around this time, he was introduced to LSD, a drug that Cynthia believed changed him deeply. She felt he became more distant, lost in a different world. Adding to the strain, John had begun seeing Yoko Ono, an avant-garde artist he first met in 1966 at a London art gallery. This meeting would eventually mark a turning point in his life, and a devastating blow for Cynthia. The final blow, Yoko in a bathrobe. By 1968, Cynthia's suspicions grew stronger as Yoko started making frequent calls and visits to their home. When she confronted John, he brushed it off, saying Yoko was only trying to raise money for her avant-garde bulls. But while Cynthia was away on holiday in May 1968, things took a dramatic turn. John invited Yoko over, and the two spent the night recording his Two Virgins album, which became infamous for its explicit cover photo of John and Yoko together. That night, as dawn broke, John and Yoko grew even closer, and the morning marked a new beginning for their relationship, and the beginning of the end for John's marriage to Cynthia. When Cynthia returned home from her holiday, she was met with an unexpected and painful sight. Yoko was in her house, wearing Cynthia's bathrobe and sipping tea with John as if it were the most ordinary thing. John's reaction was just as startling. He simply looked up and said, "Oh, hi!" Shocked and hurt, Cynthia left the house to stay with friends. The incident left her reeling, but the real heartbreak would come soon after. Adding to the chaos, Alexis Martis, known as Magic Alex, a friend of the Beatles and an engineer, claimed to have spent the night with Cynthia after she walked out on John and Yoko that evening. Weeks later, Martis added fuel to the fire by telling Cynthia that John wanted a divorce and planned to seek custody of Julian on the grounds of her supposed infidelity. Although John initially made these claims, he eventually agreed to let Cynthia file for divorce on the same grounds, resulting in an out-of-court settlement where he provided her with $100,000, a modest annual payment, and custody of Julian. A final goodbye, and John's new beginning. The end of John and Cynthia's marriage symbolized not just personal heartbreak, but a new chapter in both their lives. Cynthia often looked back and believed that John's LSD use had gradually caused him to lose interest in her, marking the beginning of the end. Her place in John's life became painfully clear during an incident in Wales when a police officer didn't recognize her as part of the group and stopped her from boarding a train with the Beatles. This moment to Cynthia reflected how distant she had become from her husband's public and personal world. Soon after the divorce, John and Yoko's relationship grew even more intense. In 1969, just months after the split, John married Yoko, setting in motion one of the most talked about relationships in music history. They would be together until John's tragic death in 1980. On December 8, 1980, an obsessed fan, Mark David Chapman, fatally shot John outside his New York City home. A tragic event that shocked many, including Yoko. He was rushed to the hospital but was pronounced dead upon arrival, leaving the world and Yoko in a state of devastation. Chapman's actions were chillingly premeditated. He didn't flee but waited calmly, reading The Catcher in the Rye until the police arrived and arrested him. Since that day, he has remained behind bars, repeatedly denied parole, while Yoko continues to preserve John's legacy. Together they had one son, Sean, who in many ways represented the new life John had chosen after his rocky marriage with Cynthia ended. But what about Julian? Julian Lennon, the journey of a Beatles son. Growing up as the son of John Lennon brought a mix of magic, fame, and struggle. Born John Charles Julian Lennon on April 8, 1963 in Liverpool, Julian came into the world under the shadow of the Beatles' growing fame. His father, John, named him after his mother, Julia Lennon, who had passed away years before Julian's birth. As a child, he was surrounded by iconic figures, even having Beatles manager Brian Epstein as his godfather. But as exciting as it might sound, Julian's early life wasn't as easy as it seemed. While Julian was still young, he witnessed the breakdown of his parents' marriage, with his mother Cynthia bearing the brunt of John's rise to fame. Julian inspired one of his father's most famous songs, Lucy in the Sky with Diamonds, based on a watercolor Julian had made of his friend, Lucy O'Donnell, surrounded by stars. Julian's young life may have been brightened by this brush with fame, but the happiness didn't last long. When he was just 5 years old, his parents' marriage ended after John left Cynthia for Japanese artist Yoko Ono. The divorce shook Julian, and he grew up mostly away from his famous father. Paul McCartney, understanding the pain Julian was going through, wrote Hey Jude to console him. Originally called Hey Jules, McCartney changed the name thinking Jude was easier to sing. Julian's connection to his father would remain complicated, but moments like these hinted at the deep love others had for him. School days and a love for art. After his parents' divorce, Julian stayed with his mother Cynthia, who did her best to create a stable environment for him. In 1974, Julian attended Kingsmead School in Hoylake, England. Shortly afterward, when his mother remarried, they moved to Wales, and he went to Ruthin School, a private boarding school in Denbighshire, North Wales. Growing up largely away from his father's immediate influence, Julian found his own interests and passions, developing a keen sense of creativity and a love for music and art. Despite the geographical and emotional distance between them, Julian's father continued to leave an imprint on his life, inspiring songs and encouraging Julian's interests from afar. Julian's love for music was undeniable, and in the early 1970s, during a rare visit, his father's then-girlfriend May Pang encouraged them to reconnect. John and Julian spent time together, with John buying him a Gibson Les Paul guitar and a drum machine one Christmas, sparking Julian's passion for music even more. John taught him some chords, a gift that would leave a lasting impact. Although these moments were sporadic, they played a significant role in forming Julian's early musical influences. Later in life, Julian would find comfort in the connection he shared with his father through music. Even if their relationship was filled with challenges, a budding career in music, Julian's first real step into the music world came at just 11 years old when he appeared on his father's album Walls and Bridges. He played drums on the track Ya Ya and later joked that if he'd known it would end up on the album, he would have played better. Credited in the album notes as starring on drums, Julian's small role set the stage for what would later become his own career in music. Growing up, Julian was influenced not only by the Beatles, but also by artists like David Bowie, Steely Dan, and AC/DC, who shaped his unique style. In 1984, Julian released his debut album Volette, which was an instant success. Produced by Phil Ramone, it included hits like Too Late for Goodbyes and earned him a Grammy nomination for Best New Artist. The album's success was bittersweet, as Julian's talent was often compared to his father's legacy, creating a challenging path for him to carve out his own identity. Paul McCartney sent Julian a telegram wishing him well, showing the support that some of his father's friends had for him. However, Julian's next album, The Secret Value of Daydreaming, 1986, didn't fare as well with critics. Despite mixed reviews, it reached number 32 on the Billboard 200, and the single Stick Around became his first #1 hit on the US album Rock Tracks chart. In 1987, Julian continued to explore different avenues, performing as the baker in the musical The Hunting of the Snark at the Royal Albert Hall in London. Later that year, he even performed with Chuck Berry, proving that his passion for music went beyond his father's influence. Julian's career experienced its ups and downs, with some singles like Now You're in Heaven finding success in Australia. He continued to release music, even collaborating with George Harrison for his 1991 album Help Yourself, which included the hit single Saltwater. In this period, Julian also contributed a cover of Ruby Tuesday for the soundtrack of The Wonder Years, further establishing his musical versatility. Shifting focus, art, philanthropy, and a return to music. In the 1990s, Julian took a step back from the music scene, drawn to philanthropy and art after meeting the Murning people of Australia. Inspired by their wisdom and the connection he felt, Julian shifted his focus to causes he cared deeply about. Despite occasional rumors that he might join the remaining Beatles for a reunion, Julian stayed independent, unwilling to step into his father's shoes. Even when the Beatles anthology series was released in 1995, the surviving members clarified that they had no plans to involve Julian in a reunion, with Paul McCartney explaining, "Why would we want to subject him to all of this?" Speaking of which, in 1998, Julian released Photograph Smile, which marked a thoughtful return to music. Released on his own label, the album received positive reviews, with music critic Stephen Thomas Erlewine praising it as well-crafted and melodic. He added that it was the kind of music that would receive greater praise if it weren't made by the son of a Beatle. Julian continued to explore new paths, even recording a version of When I'm 64 for an Allstate insurance commercial in 2002. In 2009, he revisited Lucy in the Sky with Diamonds in a special way by releasing a tribute song called Lucy. Inspired by Lucy Vaughan, Née O'Donnell, the childhood friend who had inspired the original song, Julian honored her memory with this song, donating 50% of the proceeds to lupus research. He also continued to work on internet-based projects, showing that his creativity went beyond traditional music. Julian's journey came full circle in 2011 with the release of Everything Changes, an album that was later documented in Through the Picture Window, a film that followed his creative process and included insights from music icons like Steven Tyler and Bono. The documentary also became an app, showcasing how Julian's artistic vision and modern technology could blend seamlessly. In 2022, he released Jude, an album title that holds personal significance, named after the song Hey Jude, which was written by Paul McCartney to comfort Julian during his parents' divorce. Jude symbolized Julian's journey of self-acceptance. The album's themes focused on struggles both internal and global, addressing issues he had dealt with over 3 decades of songwriting. Reflecting on the title, Julian said, "Calling it Jude was very coming of age for me, very much facing up to who I am." In 2024, Julian revisited his earlier work, releasing a remixed version of I Should Have Known with Spike Stent. Speaking about it, Julian shared, "The song was always a favorite of mine. I wanted to breathe life into the world again." This release marked another chapter in his creative journey, showing that Julian Lennon's artistry, though forever connected to his father's legacy, continues to evolve in his own way. Now that was Julian's career and all he achieved in music. But what about his relationship with father John Lennon and stepmother Yoko Ono? Julian Lennon's complicated bond with his father. For Julian, growing up as the son of a music icon wasn't easy. John Lennon was a public figure who preached peace and love to the world, but that message didn't always come home to his son. Theirs was a relationship marked by absence, anger, and a search for connection, all while Julian tried to find his own identity. You see, Julian's relationship with his father was complex, and he never shied away from talking about it. When John was killed in 1980, Julian felt a mix of emotions, sorrow, anger, and resentment. Years later, he expressed his frustrations, saying, "I've never really wanted to know the truth about how Dad was with me. There was some very negative stuff talked about me, like when he said I'd come out of a whiskey bottle on a Saturday night. Stuff like that. You think, where's the love in that?" Julian also looked up to Paul McCartney, often spending time with him more than with his own father. Reflecting on those years, Julian shared, "Paul and I used to hang about quite a bit, more than Dad and I did. We had a great friendship going, and there seemed to be far more pictures of me and Paul playing together than of me and my dad. This conflict wasn't just about time or attention." For Julian, John's public image as a champion of peace and love felt like hypocrisy. He once told the Daily Telegraph, "I have to say that from my point of view, I felt he was a hypocrite. Dad could talk about peace and love out loud to the world, but he could never show it to the people who supposedly meant the most to him, his wife and son. This wasn't easy to reconcile, and it stayed with Julian for years." He later admitted, "Mom was more about love than Dad. He sang about it, he spoke about it, but he never really gave it, at least not to me as his son." Julian recognized that darker side within himself too, explaining, "The darker side definitely comes from Dad. Whenever I get too aggressive, which comes from Dad's side, I try to calm myself down, be more positive. While John was largely absent from Julian's life after his divorce from Cynthia, there were some brief moments of reconnection. In the mid-1970s, John's then-girlfriend May Pang encouraged him to spend more time with Julian. These years marked a rare period when father and son actually bonded. Julian recalled, "Dad and I got on a great deal better then. We had a lot of fun, laughed a lot, and had a great time in general when he was with May Pang." For Julian, these memories with his father were some of the happiest he could recall. They were filled with laughter and warmth that he rarely experienced before. But this good period wouldn't last, and soon John returned to Yoko, leaving Julian with only memories of those fleeting happy times. Forgiveness and moving forward. In 2009, Julian reflected on his past feelings toward his father, sharing his journey toward forgiveness. He revealed that holding on to anger and resentment had created a constant cloud over his life. But creating music, especially songs like Lucy, provided an outlet for healing. He said, "I realized if I continued to feel that anger and bitterness towards my dad, I would have a constant cloud hanging over my head my whole life." After recording the song Lucy, almost by nature, it felt right to fulfill the circle. Forgive Dad, put the pain, anger, and bitterness in the past, and focus and appreciate the good things. Writing became a form of therapy for Julian, allowing him to move on in ways he never expected. For the first time, he felt a real sense of forgiveness, saying, "It also has allowed me to embrace Dad and the Beatles." This journey toward forgiveness, however, was never easy. He described it as a process, one that he would return to time and again as he revisited his feelings toward his father. And even after years, he would sometimes admit that full forgiveness was still hard to achieve, revealing that it took continual effort to let go of past hurts. Reflecting on a complicated legacy, Julian's path to understanding his father remained complex, even as he grew older. When he turned 48, he still avoided the idea of marriage and family, explaining in a 2011 interview that his reluctance came from not wanting to repeat his father's mistakes. "My father was young and didn't know what the hell he was doing. That's the reason I haven't had children yet. I didn't want to do the same thing. No, I'm not ready. I want to know who I am first." This self-reflection showed how deeply his father's actions influenced him, leading him to question his own readiness to create a family. In later years, Julian watched the Beatles' Get Back documentary, which brought back memories of his father in a different light. Watching John's youthful spirit and sense of humor, Julian found himself reconnecting with the man he remembered from childhood. "I remembered him as a kid. Goofy, funny, sarcastic, charming," he said. "I fell in love with him again because that was the guy I remember before it all went pear-shaped." Julian's relationship with Paul McCartney and the iconic song Hey Jude has also been a constant reminder of his father's legacy. While Hey Jude was written by McCartney to console him after his parents' divorce, Julian has admitted to feeling a love-hate relationship with the song. He shared that he's probably heard it more times than most people and doesn't particularly enjoy it when friends send him videos of children playing and singing Hey Jude. The song, while meaningful, also carried the weight of those challenging early years. Despite this, he continues to cherish the song's sentiment and its connection to McCartney's kindness during a difficult time. Julian once shared that he'd considered writing a memoir about his life and might explore these deep, unresolved emotions in detail. With a childhood marked by a famous father who often struggled to show him love, Julian's story remains complex. In 2020, he told The Observer, "I strive for forgiveness and understanding in that area of my life, for the difficult times he put my mom and me through. But our relationship was getting better before he died. He was in a happier place. He wanted to reconnect not just with me, but with the rest of his family. He never got a chance to do so, even now. Almost 40 years after he died, I hold my father's memory dear." For Julian Lennon, coming to terms with his father's legacy has been a journey filled with love, pain, and a desire for closure. Even today, the impact of John Lennon's life and choices still lingers, shaping Julian's own path as he continues to honor and reconcile with his father's memory. But Julian's journey with his father's legacy didn't end with just memories of John. Another significant relationship in his life brought its own set of challenges. His connection with his stepmother, Yoko Ono. Julian Lennon and Yoko Ono, a relationship defined by legacy and loss. In September 2010, Julian Lennon found himself at a unique family gathering, the opening of his photography show, Timeless, the photography of Julian Lennon. On this evening, he was surrounded by people who had each played significant roles in his father's life. There was his mother, Cynthia Lennon, his half-brother, Sean, his stepmother, Yoko Ono, and even May Pang, the woman John had dated for a brief time. For the first time, these 5 people, each deeply connected to John Lennon, were in the same room. Remarkably, This reunion wasn't filled with tension, but with smiles, laughter, and even a few embraces. At the event, Julian spoke about how photography became his personal escape, a creative space that felt free from the weight of his father's shadow. My dad wasn't really a photographer, he shared with Rolling Stone, adding that it allowed him to breathe a little more. It was a new world, one that didn't carry the expectation of following in John Lennon's footsteps. This gathering marked a shift, a moment where past grudges seemed to ease, at least for the evening. Julian Lennon's relationship with his father, John, was marked by hurt and distance, and at times, even cruelty. As a child, Julian once heard his father make a bitter comparison between himself and his half-brother, Sean. John reportedly told him, "Sean was the product of love. You were the product of a whiskey bottle." The stinging remark, shared by Julian years later, revealed the pain he'd carried from feeling less valued than his younger brother. While it's true Yoko Ono didn't cause John's unkind words, she was a reminder of the family split. She was the woman John had chosen over Julian's mother, Cynthia. Later in life, Julian described himself as a mother's boy, fully aware that his bond with his mother may have complicated his relationship with Yoko. Yoko, for her part, once explained this divide, saying, "Of course, if he's too friendly with me, then I think that it hurts his other relatives." Still, many believe Yoko could have done more to encourage John to take a stronger role in Julian's life. And Julian, with this lasting hurt, never found an easy path toward closeness with Yoko. Despite these tensions, John had once expressed his desire to improve his relationship with Julian, as he shared in an interview with All We Are Saying. Yet John's life was cut short in 1980, and any chance of mending their relationship was lost. For Julian, this loss was layered with regret, as he never had the chance to fully reconcile with his father. Money and moving on. After John Lennon's death, his estate revealed another layer of the complex family dynamics. His will left everything. An estate worth about £220 million to Yoko Ono. Julian received nothing directly, and this decision only deepened the division between Yoko and him. Over the years, the estate earned millions in royalties, which Yoko controlled. Hurt and excluded, Julian took legal action, and after a 16-year legal battle, he finally received a settlement rumored to be around £20 million in the mid-1990s. However, the settlement didn't immediately heal old wounds. Julian spent years working through feelings of resentment, especially when it came to Yoko. The legal battle, though, wasn't just about money. It was about Julian standing up for himself and seeking the acknowledgement he felt he never received during his father's life. His journey to peace came gradually, often encouraged by his love for his half-brother Sean. Speaking to an interviewer, Julian shared, "I think the key point to all this, for me at least, has been Sean. If I hurt Sean's mother, then I hurt Sean." It's a roundabout way of thinking about things, but because I love Sean so much, I just don't want to hurt him. This realization allowed him to put the past behind him, finding a way to let go for Sean's sake. Today, Julian's relationship with Yoko Ono is a reflection of his bond with his half-brother. And while some wounds may never fully heal, Julian's love for Sean has brought him a sense of peace. Even with Yoko, his journey with her continues to be shaped by memories healing and the unique family legacy they share. In what ways do you think Julian's complicated relationship with his father shaped his journey toward peace and healing with Yoko? Share your thoughts in the comments below. And don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit the notification bell for more fascinating stories.